Sage and Shirley, welcome to the show. I'm going to get straight on with our first question, as we like to do here. Now, your book is all about healing, and the focus is on healing, particularly from sexual abuse. But obviously, I'm sure these principles apply to wider things as well. But before we talk about how to heal, I'd love to talk to you about why healing is necessary. On a basic level, that sounds like, well, of course, healing is necessary. Abuse is a terrible thing. But I would just love to learn a bit more about how does abuse actually damage people? What is the actual effects that come from it?
Ben, first, I'll just say thanks so much for having us on. It's really a treat to be here and on this forum. So thank you for taking the time. And I'll just start maybe by such a big question, and and there's a lot to it. I think for myself, and I'll just speak to that first, and also say that I know many survivors who I have spoken with can relate to a lot of these things for sure. But initially there was a lot of fear to look at what the impacts could be. I think it was scary to consider that I could be impacted. And I think the messaging, and I'll identify myself as a survivor of child sexual abuse. So that's where I'm speaking from. But the messaging that we often get is one of hopelessness, that it's like this forever broken, forever damaged, and it can feel really, really difficult. I heard a lot the saying, hurt people, hurt people. And I had a lot of fear of what that meant for me, knowing that I was hurt and then continuing that hurt in whatever form, right? Not necessarily of continuing sexual abuse, but just continuing harmful behaviors from a place of hurt and damage. And I was afraid to look at having impact. So I think for a long time, it was like, I'm not impacted. All is good. Also, because there was a lot of messaging that I internalized of needing to protect my perpetrator and the story and my family around all of it. And so if I had problems, that hurt them. I was told a lot that if you think it's bad for you, imagine how much worse it is for your perpetrator because they did it. And that messaging for me, I internalized that I embodied his shame and his pain and my family's shame and pain. And so what that ended up doing is really, I couldn't struggle, right? I couldn't identify problems or within myself because it would hurt other people. And certainly I didn't want to talk about what had happened or my experience. And that was I think an okay place for a while until I started really struggling and really seeing as a young mom and wife just that I needed help. I was broken. And for me, that looked like feeling like everything around me was controlling me, being triggered by things, feeling like I needed to control everything, feeling a lack of trust, feeling like I was broken and couldn't really totally become great things because I had been too damaged as a child. And so I think the effects, it's so hard to even articulate how many levels, right? Just that lack of trust for self is so impactful in every aspect of life. And I didn't want to look at that until I really felt like I had to, because I didn't want to continue. I saw how I wasn't the mom and the wife that I wanted to be. And so I wanted to change. And it required really taking a self-confronting look at myself and saying, what is going on in here and what can I do about it?
Ben, I wanted well, let me just add another perspective, like another layer onto the healing that we need. Because so I'm speaking actually as an advocate and someone who's worked professionally and in my personal life and in my church callings with survivors of sexual abuse. And for sure, there are individual impacts on survivors, of course, on perpetrators. Someone is in a state of extreme woundedness if they're interacting with someone in a way that violates their bodies and their agency so profoundly. And I think there's another wound that we don't often talk about, or I think we need to talk about more at least, which is in our communities. Why is it so quiet when this is so many people's experiences? Why is it so difficult for a survivor to come forward and be believed? And why aren't we holding people accountable sooner and helping them heal? I think there's a deep wound in our families, in our wards and branches. Let's just speak as Latter-day Saints, in our broader communities of maybe being afraid of the wound and being afraid of seeing the reality of how we're interacting with each other, and afraid of what bringing it to light could be. And the loss there is we lose like true connection with each other, like authentic connection and authentic relationships. And we are placed on this earth to connect as a human family and to build real relationships and to help each other in real life. And when that's all quiet and silenced, there's just an opportunity for us as communities and as like not just survivors to do the work, because I really don't I think it's a personal journey for everyone, but also like there's work for me to be doing, and for anyone listening to the podcast to create a community and a society that embraces healing more and embraces the light and has more hope in Jesus Christ's atonement, that healing can really happen, that is more powerful than their fear of the shame and the stigma and the short-term consequences of accountability. So I think that's another layer of the impact of sexual abuse is it creates communities and cultures that are afraid to, when we don't address it, that are afraid to live authentically and to really stand up for things that are wrong.
Here's a question for you, Sage, if I can. I've read that you had been introduced to a lot of your work you met with a Nobel laureate. Is that correct? And I've done my research, and I just wondered, because I read that kind of opened your eyes to a new kind of level about the interaction and the consequences of abuse, and just wondered if you could shed any light on the main kind of things that you learned from working with that person, and how that connects kind of the scientific side of it to those big spiritually heavy things that we do feel as Christians and believers who experience these things, and it affects us spiritually as well as physically.
Yeah, a few years into working in this space, I actually first just through a lecture learned about Dr. Dennis Mukwege. He's an OBGYN in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, doing amazing work for survivors of wartime conflict-related sexual violence. And I was really impressed with how holistic his approach and his colleagues' approach is. They take in, of course, the physical impacts, but also the mental and economic, legal. They have kind of this 4-pillared approach. But I had an opportunity to visit his hospital, Ponzi Hospital. And actually every morning they start with a devotional, like a worship service. And it's not formally in their 4-pillar process. But then I got to meet with people on his team whose specific job was working with faith leaders in the community, because the messenger matters. Like, if your faith is a big part of your life, then hearing from your faith leader that this is not your fault and that you're innocent, that's different than if the exact same person, or than if a different person, sorry, it's different than if and actually therapists have a huge role. So I'm not, this is not a jab on therapists, but it's different if your therapist says those exact same words than if your bishop says those words, because you're looking to him as a spiritual leader who's also someone who's like who has keys to lead the congregation spiritually in healing. And so that was I've been really, really inspired. Dr. Mukwege is also a pastor, and his faith really inspires him. And I've been really inspired by actually how spiritual in nature healing is, and our bodies and our spirits in DNC 93 are inseparably connected. Like that is our soul. And so whether we have physical wounds or emotional wounds or spiritual wounds, it's all part of our soul and our spirit. And so I think if I took one thing away from that, is that it matters for us to be talking about this as Latter-day Saints, like in our faith and belief context, because that's such a huge part of healing for us as individuals, is really taking a holistic approach of the whole person, which includes our faith.
That's really cool. So I'm interested in kind of how abuse impacts identity, and I wonder if you could both share about like how and why does abuse distort someone's kind of sense of divine worth and self-worth, but also it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on what lies about God can be embedded when someone's going through this, because there's the kind of lies we believe about ourselves and also lies that we believe about God from a faith perspective, when especially when someone's kind of at the start of that journey as well, and kind of figuring everything out and kind of coming to terms with that. Yeah.
Ben, such powerful things to think about. I really appreciated all that Sage shared and just considering the impact on the community. And I also was reminded of just when we don't talk about these things, when we feel like they are too ugly or too dark to talk about them, we really are. You just talked about, how does it impact our belief in God, or what kind of God do we believe in? And I remember realizing that all of the fear and shame around this really was sending a message that there are things that are too dark for the Savior. And it was not sending a message that actually he did descend below all things, below all dark and ugly and horrible things, so that he could heal, right? So that he could give us the opportunity to heal. And when we live afraid of acknowledging those things, we miss the opportunity to be witnesses of that power, of that Jesus that we testify of, that we preach of, right? And prophesy of, that he did come so that he could heal all things. And then I love talking about identity. I know for me, coming to realize that I was worth healing impacts me still every day, and definitely impacted my desire and my belief and hope that I could heal. Because I think the messaging, just all of the fear and shame around it did feel like it's too dark, it's too ugly, it's too broken. And I don't know what I can do about that. I remember thinking about the beautiful principle that God commands us to fulfill the measure of our creation, and realizing that I was not created to be forever broken. I was not created to be the result of trauma, but he created me to fulfill my measure of my creation, which is to become like him and become like my Heavenly Mother. And that is my effort every day, right? But when I saw God in a light of trying to earn his love or value, thinking that I had to be something or do something in order to be good enough, I couldn't see that. I couldn't see what that meant for me. And having a therapist say to me, when I went into his office and told him all of the ways I was broken and all of the things I was doing wrong. And he said, Shirley, God just wants to be with you. He wasn't waiting for me to become something that I wasn't, or waiting for me to fix myself and repair all of the damage. He just wanted to be with me. And that really changed how I saw even what the purpose of prayer was, or reading the scriptures, or going to the temple, all the things, all the check boxes that I had been taught and tried to live and do. It changed what the motive and purpose of them was. No longer to check a box to say, oh, I'm a good person now, or I didn't do that, I'm not a good person. But instead, to be with God, to be in places that I could be with them, with my heavenly parents. And what does that look like? Maybe it doesn't look like the box. So that, for me, really transformed my journey, honestly, and my hope that I could be on a journey and that I didn't have to forever be the result of this trauma that I had experienced.
I just want to pick up on that, because I think that's something that is important for everyone, is this realizing that you're worth healing. Because I think maybe it's the Englishman in me, but I'm still very much not in the business of focusing on my worth to be healed and all of that. I'm much more in the business of beating myself up for my mistakes, I'm still very much in that sense, even though I know that's not the right thing, and I know it's not what I should be doing, but that's just life still. But I've found a good practice, actually, that's helped me with this, from my temple worship, which was, when in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve clothed themselves because they've been they've opened their eyes to the fact that they were naked, and they were ashamed. And God comes down and says to them, "Where are you?" And they explain. And God's response when they tell them about their nakedness and their shame, he says, "Who told you this?" Basically, I'm paraphrasing there, but whom was it that said, in Old English? And that part, I've always kept that with me, because I've always whenever there's been a thought where I feel bad about myself or something, I always imagine me in the Garden of Eden and God saying down to me, "Who told you that?" And, God's confusion and asking that just signifies that it's not from him. Therefore, it's not right, or I shouldn't listen to it. And so I feel like that's become a really good filter for me, is playing that scene in my head whenever I have a doubt, or whether I am beating myself up over something, or maybe don't feel great about myself. And it's really helped me. So I just wanted to pick up on that, because I just think that is such an important point for everyone. But I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, Sage, because I kind of jumped in there. We'll get back to the episode in just 1 second, but I just wanted to make sure that you've double-checked that you are subscribed to the show, so that we can keep growing it and that you don't miss any of our exciting episodes. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you shared that, because also part of healing, because we're connected to the people around us, none of us live in a vacuum. It's going to create probably some discomfort for other people. It's actually, the discomfort is an opportunity to see things more clearly, to look at ourselves more honestly. But I, like you, kind of have this urge to not make anyone feel uncomfortable. and that's actually not the most loving thing I could do. The most loving thing I could do is authentically and honestly walk my own journey of healing, not as a survivor of sexual abuse, but as someone who, we all need healing. And then I wanted to say, well, two more things. Just first of all, Shirley has taught me so much about how important identity is. And when our most important identity is as a child of God, it actually doesn't negate or take away from or make unimportant on other identities, like being a survivor of abuse. It allows you to embrace those identities with a lot of hope and authenticity, and to be able to actually share things without shame, and to be able to connect to other people who are experiencing things. I think sometimes we think if we're healed, then we wouldn't talk about any of the hard things that have happened in our life. But that's not helpful for anyone. It then can unintentionally create this misguided narrative that like if we're really faithful and righteous, everything is good in our lives, which is not what living in a mortal fallen world is. So I wanted to share that. And then if you'll just let me, I think it's a good opportunity to share one more thing. We often, children and adults, I've cared for both as a sexual assault nurse examiner, are not empowered with true medically accurate information about their bodies. And that can lead to a lot of doubt in abuse. So, for example, sexual arousal is an autonomic response. That means it happens automatically in response to like a sense, like a touch, sight, smell. And so I've met kids and adults who, when they experienced arousal when they were being abused, then started to worry, wait, did I want this? Am I a part of it? Was I asking for it? And that can create a lot of confusion and then guilt and shame and worry. Abuse is like it can be so difficult to really like identify and understand, because by nature it's kind of happening in the dark and it's manipulative and it's violating agency, often like not so obviously. And so I think that can be a real stumbling block to identity, is people actually blaming themselves for the abuse. And as you learn more truth in a relationship with God, as you meet with professional help, medical help, psychological help, spiritual help, just the more we can share, then the more, and that's just such a big part of the healing journey, then the more we can kind of heal that perspective of our identity and better understand like the reality of what's happened, which is really important for healing. So I think that's another area that is a challenge for a lot of survivors who I've interacted with over the years.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I wonder what to you both is the difference then, considering your book from a Latter-day Saint perspective. What's the difference between, I guess, restoring that sense of identity through Jesus Christ versus just the comforting of negative emotions, or the putting away of and getting back to being happy again after you maybe fall into a rut, or you're being, it's this abusive situation's in your mind and you just want to get it out of there.
Sage, you go ahead.
Maybe I'll start, and then Shirley is always gonna hopefully correct me too. Actually, that's something I really love about Shirley is I don't get things right all the time, and we need that. So like always default to the people with lived experience is what I want to say. But we have a whole chapter at the beginning called Uncovering Wounds. And I actually think that thinking about things in terms of like physical wounds can sometimes be helpful. This is a good question, Ben, because what is the difference between covering a wound up and like allowing it to continue to fester? Because it's easy to convince ourselves that like we're all good. Like we're like, if we just are like good in every other area of life and we become really, really accomplished and successful, like we have healed. Like I think actually maybe self-deception, that sounds a little hard, which is why I was hesitant to say that, but not really seeing ourselves honestly is easy to do. Like that's what Adam and Eve did, is they hid. And it's easy to hide from ourselves. And so if there's one principle that's really stood out to me throughout the book, and we talk about in more concrete terms, but bringing things into the light and living in that light, I think is the difference between really embracing and leaning into a healing journey versus hiding from it or trying to avoid it. Shirley probably can add something a little more, I don't know, specific and concrete, but there's a principle to think about.
No, Sage, that's so beautiful. I think often about just the principle of you can't fix something that you can't see is broken. You can't heal something that you can't see. And just for myself, I think I was so afraid to look at the potential wounds, and then to realize as I looked at those things, I actually felt so empowered to realize that I could use my agency to heal because of Jesus Christ. I didn't have to be afraid to look at those things. And you asked what is different about this book. I think getting all of the professional help and really constructive and needed help from different sources is so essential. And for me, it felt really difficult to live my experience within the context of the gospel of Jesus Christ that I knew. For one, the God that I worshiped, right, was a different God, a one of needing to earn my value, who I felt afraid to approach in my brokenness. Another, just what is real forgiveness? What does forgiveness look like in the context of this lived experience? What does that mean? Is that the same as reconciliation, as it seems like it's being portrayed to me? And is forgiving and forgetting a real thing? Just what does holding accountable really look like? Is that vindictive and mean and unchristlike? And it felt really difficult in the context of the gospel of Jesus Christ that I understood to really know how to live in truth in my experience, like live in the light and reality of what I was experiencing. And so this book really is helping to helping to look at these very essential principles of the gospel and doctrines that we believe in a new light that enable us to live in our experiences and live these things as a disciple of Jesus Christ. So I can be a disciple of Jesus Christ and forgive and live in the truth of my experiences as a survivor of sexual abuse. I can be a disciple of Jesus Christ and hold accountable or have boundaries, right? I can be a disciple of Jesus Christ and be an advocate for people. And that's what the hope of the book is, to help people feel like they can belong here with us within the gospel of Jesus Christ and live their experiences and know they do not need to be afraid. They can bring them to the light and they can have a healing journey that acknowledges and sees all of it without being afraid of that, and be wonderful and significant and important parts of our community in the gospel.
Something that I think, oh, did you want to say something there, Sage?
I just wanted to add something that Shirley has taught me, and this really pushed us in the book a lot through the process of, there were some chapters we had to rewrite from scratch like 10 times. That's not an exaggeration, because something Shirley's taught me is, if a principle of the gospel of Jesus Christ is true, then it applies in every situation. Then if we understand the principle, we're not making caveats and we're not saying, oh, but except her in this situation, which actually, through the process, I realized I have either been misunderstanding principles of the gospel of Jesus Christ, or my understanding has been incomplete. Not to say that we have like a complete understanding now, but it has been a really intense, but also, I would say, inspiring and revelatory process. Like, I love the gospel of Jesus Christ so much more and feel like I can live it more authentically, having gone through this process of really trying to understand some of the things that Shirley mentioned. What does forgiveness really look like? And how can I live it in a way that is true to not minimizing myself either, or minimizing the reality of my life experience? Or justice and mercy have been portrayed as opposites in tension with each other, like on a balancing scale. Like, I think we all have that image in our mind of like, justice is here and mercy is here, and how do we balance them out? And it's completely changed my perspective of justice and mercy. I don't see them as opposing anymore. I actually see them as needed to work together. Like, you can't experience mercy without justice. and justice, um, and justice brings about mercy. And that is such a different way of conceptualizing and understanding these principles. So Shirley said it already, but just hopefully for a listener, if you feel like intention, like I want to live the gospel of Jesus Christ and I don't understand how to live it in my circumstances in a way that also doesn't feel like I'm betraying like how my life experiences and who I am, that doesn't require me to live like a smaller version of myself. We've really tried um, to articulate and show examples, because everyone's journey will be different, in ways that can be really practical and applicable in everyday life.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I'm reading a really good book at the moment too, called The Abundant Life by Robert Millett. And it's purely just about the actual gospel of Jesus Christ, and living it. And I'm opening my eyes to more like I'm living beneath my means. I could be doing this much more. And I one of my favorite ever paintings is right behind me. I don't know if you can really make it out on the screen, but it's by J. Kirk Richards, and it's just right at the back of it, you see Jesus, and he's just knocking on one of the doors. And it's I really wanted to get it because it's to me like in my home, I need to just keep remembering to actually let Jesus into my life and enjoy that abundant life, because sometimes I'm just so busy and or things are so heavy in life that forget to do that. But whatever we're going through, um, especially really challenging, really heavy stuff, like sometimes we just need to let him in metaphorically and get really close to him and his gospel um, and take advantage of that. So I'm a big believer in that. Something that I really wanted to ask you both that might, well, no, something I really wanted to ask you both that I think is a good gateway question into getting into discussions about forgiveness and healing and all of those kind of topics is, um, what is healing not in this scenario? And also, what does healing look like in lived experience? Kind of a good, what does it look like? What does it doesn't look like when we get to it? And then we can go into the aspects of like forgiveness and stuff and how they take us down that path.
Maybe I'll start and then Shirley, you can jump in. Yeah, this is a really good question, because it's like, what does it even mean to heal? Like we talk about things actually in metaphors quite a lot. And so we use this framework in the book of connection. And every time we heal, and healing really is a journey. Like it's not an event, it's a process. I actually think it's the work of our life for all of us. Um, but every time as we walk the healing journey, we'll experience more real and authentic connection to God, to ourselves, and to the people around us. Like our capacity to be in a relationship that is true and meaningful, and where we can live our full selves and not feel like we have to hide parts of ourselves in each of those domains, with God, with ourselves, and with each other, expands. And we share more about what that could look like in each situation. And so really we describe woundedness as disconnection, like feeling disconnected from God, disconnected from yourself, and disconnected from others. Yeah, Shirley, what do you want to add?
No, thank you, Sage. I can say I really love how Sage has referenced just minimizing ourselves, right? That's a really important thing for me to think about in even now in relationships that I am in or places I am in. If I feel like I need to be minimized or minimize myself, that leaves me to really consider, why is that? What is the impact of this? I remember having, and Sage references as well, just healing being a journey. And a good friend of mine, and really this is often, I think we can talk about being healed as something that we're done, right? And maybe even we think of being healed as becoming, or becoming probably isn't the right word, but being able to be the person who, as if the event never happened, right? Like, who would we be as if this didn't happen? That's the result we're looking for. And I remember just talking to somebody being like, healing really isn't trying to erase the reality of what happened, but it's the becoming the person I know I can be with this, right? It's what Christ talks about when he says creating beauty from ashes. It's the Japanese art, right, of the pottery that's broken and then it's put back together with gold. And I wish I could recall what the Japanese word is for it, but that's
Kintsugi.
what. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Of course, that is healing, right? It is becoming even a better, more beautiful version of who we are. Not that that makes the trauma right or makes it justified in any way. And yet we get the opportunity to choose how we respond to the experiences that we have and to become through those. And it was and is very helpful for me to think, when am I trying to hide? Or just like you referenced Adam and Eve, right? When am I trying to cover myself and present an image? That, I think, is lack of healing. That gives me a moment to pause and say, okay, what am I trying to hide from here about myself or about the situation? And what instead can I look at and hold out and say, no, I can address this. I am worth addressing this and not being afraid and walking in the light, right? Walking with God as the youth theme this year. So that disconnection theme has been really helpful to think about in relationships. What are relationships where there is disconnection, and am I able to be my full self connected to myself? And I think just having lived this, being somebody who was very afraid to look at myself and live in the full light of my story and becoming somebody who, and again, this is a journey, right? I'm still addressing these things all of the time, but becoming someone who wants to live in the light of who I am, who wants to see the wounds, who wants to see my faults and address those, who wants to be unafraid and feels greater confidence. The relationship with my spouse, the relationship with my kids, all of it is different because my whole perspective on life is different. The goal, the desire is different. Instead of living in fear, it's living in confidence. And maybe that's the best, simplest way I could say.
No, I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
I don't know if it would be meaningful for your listeners, but I could just read a couple of really short excerpts because we give like examples of what feeling disconnected might be like for everyone. Everyone would experience it a little differently, but these are actually really, I love reflecting on these statements myself because they're just moments to see ourselves a little more and actually just relate. So you can cut this if you want to, but
No, I won't cut it. We
let
want to
me
hear
share it. Okay. So it's different for everyone, but I'll just read 3 little excerpts. So first, being disconnected from God. When we feel disconnected from God, we struggle to feel and believe in God's love for us just as we are. Instead, we might feel we have to earn love from our heavenly parents and the Savior by proving or achieving something. We think that if we can just read our scriptures enough, pray enough, serve enough, and be good enough, then maybe we might become worthy of God's love. Disconnection can feel spiritually isolating. We may feel like we may not feel like we belong in holy spaces, such as the temple or in worship services. And then when we become disconnected from ourselves, we don't truly know ourselves, trust ourselves, or like who we are. We often feel disappointed in ourselves and even self-loathing. We feel trapped and helpless at the mercy of whatever is happening around us. We feel weak and incapable of changing the destructive ways we interact with ourselves and those we love. When we become disconnected from others, our relationships are superficial, hyper-aware and fearful of how others perceive us. We avoid vulnerability. By hiding parts of ourselves, we close ourselves off to the opportunity for those around us to truly see us and know us. This prevents us from forming deep, authentic, meaningful relationships. We don't get to experience unconditional love because we don't allow ourselves to be fully seen or to receive it. Fearful of the world around us, our well-meaning attempts to protect the people we love are tainted with distrust and control. Anyways, we go through examples of all of these, and actually one of my favorite parts of the book is we have real survivors' experiences in a narrative format, but they're like real words of real people who have lived this journey and who are living this journey. But all of those are, I think probably anyone could relate to one of those statements at one point in their life. And they're just moments to reflect and see ourselves more clearly. And then we go into what connection can look like, which is kind of the opposite of some of those things. And that's really what we're created to be, is like fully connected at one. Like God brings all things together, all truth together. Like that is kind of the goal, is being fully connected to God and to ourselves and to the human family, to the people around us.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to ask you a question like now that is going to make me look like I'm conducting at a baptism, because I'm just going to kind of run through some points in the order of service, because I'm just like enjoying hearing you both talk, and I don't want to get in the way of it, of a nice flow. So I would love to ask you about, well, first, some advice for those who may be in the early stages of recognizing or coming to terms with abuse that they're kind of involved with, whether it's themselves as a victim of it, or maybe a friend or a loved one of someone, and how they kind of, even if they don't feel ready, like what do they do? How do they navigate that situation? And then also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on. See, I'm doing a kind of double bill, just because I just want to hear you both on forgiveness and how forgiveness relates to this, because it can be quite messy at times. I certainly think that forgiveness, there are different ways of viewing it, right? There, like, is forgiveness reconciliation? Some people, I'm aware of situations where it's almost the victim has been frowned upon because they're behaving in a way that is like, well, you should forgive them, really. It's been a while, or something, where it's like, wow, that, from my point of view, that's like, whoa, that's a really wrong way to view forgiveness. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think we get right and what we don't get right about forgiveness. But first, that kind of, those first steps. That's two huge topics, but I'm just going to throw them at you both, because I know you can take it.
Oh, and such important topics. I think, Ben, for me, what I, from this book and to every survivor, and also people surrounding survivors, to know that they are worth this journey. You are worth it. We need your voice. We need your experience. We need who you are in whole, complete form, not minimized or diminished or silenced in any way, but all of you. And it is scary. That is absolutely valid and right and true. There hasn't been a part of this journey that has been easy or simple for me. It's still very difficult. Those things that you're referencing, that messaging around forgiveness, I know that messaging personally. I understand the fear and also the challenge and the grief of lost relationships and changed things that feel very difficult and heavy. And also remembering that this work is about becoming. It's about becoming all that we are meant to be. And it's about becoming like God, and that He walks that with us. Our heavenly parents walk this with us as much as we want them to walk it with us. They will do that and will enlighten our path. I really value the scripture, just line upon line, precept upon precept. I think I was somebody who felt really in control of my life and felt like I could just manage and do all the things I wanted to do, and realizing there's a lot I don't have control of. And also, that's okay. Sometimes it takes time, and that's okay. So allowing for time, allowing for space, allowing for my own journey, having compassion for my bad days or bad weeks or my all of the things that I am and the process of all of this, it's okay. And still I can still choose to engage in that journey. Even amidst all of the chaos and the darkness, I can still choose each day to engage in that. So I think just knowing you are worth it and remembering that every day. And anytime that you feel diminished or silenced, know that that is something that you can confront and say, no, I'm worth this and I can know how to do this. I also, it's been really empowering for me to think of being accountable for the person I'm becoming. Like I get to choose. The principle of agency means so much to me. It literally was what was fought over in the pre-existence, right? Like this principle of agency was so important because it is the only way that we don't have to continue hurting. We don't have to continue hurting others and we don't have to continue hurting ourselves because we can choose to heal because of Jesus Christ. We can choose that journey. And it is, like Sage said, this is really, I talk to my kids about it. This is the work of life. I think it's the work of eternity. It's the work of becoming like God. So it's not something to fear, but something to say, I can do, sufficient is the day, right? Like I can do what is required today to live in my value, to live in my worth, and to take one step towards healing, however that looks today, and not being afraid of that. And then I'll let Sage speak to whatever you would like, Sage, about that and forgiveness.
I just want to add on a quote by C.S. Lewis that we quote at the end of the chapter on uncovering wounds, where we talk about like a good place to start is really starting to understand things in concrete terms. And this is just so powerful to me. So we preface it with look for, and this is just summarizing what Shirley said, look forward to who you will become. This, the healing journey, is the beginning of a new life. Now, at last, you are beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. And that's C.S. Lewis. But I think it's true. I mean, some of the most compassionate, authentic, strong, courageous people I've met are survivors of abuse because they've experienced a depth of pain and grief and loss and are finding a way forward. Like embracing someone who is embracing their agency. It just reeks of like God's like divine nature. I think that is who God is, who our heavenly parents are. Like they want us to choose and become the highest versions of ourselves, and people who are leaning in, and that's not to minimize the challenge and the difficulty and that like it's all good. Like it's tough sledding moving forward, but the process is what changes you, and like leaning in is the way, with Christ, right? The capital, the way. And then I really am so glad that forgiveness, I think, is such a good example of many of the principles that we share in the book, which is first actually kind of debunking what forgiveness is not, because it is weaponized a lot. I think sometimes in a well-meaning way, and sometimes, yeah, just not even realizing that we're misunderstanding it. So we actually pull from a quote that Shirley found from Elder Neil L. Anderson. And I'm just going to read these four because for me, these, I'll share each part of the quote and just expound just a little bit, because actually I think understanding what forgiveness is not then kind of leaves you with a little bit of a question of, okay, so what is forgiveness then? Because all the things I thought it was, turns out it's not. At least that was my experience. So I'm just direct quote from Elder Anderson. Forgiveness is not excusing accountability or failing to protect oneself or others from further harm. we then expound. This means that forgiveness is fully compatible with acknowledging the severity of the wounds inflicted and taking appropriate actions to connect individuals who perpetrated sexual abuse to the real consequences of their actions. So that's the first one. Then second, forgiveness is not continuing. This is a direct quote from Elder Anderson again. Forgiveness is not continuing a relationship with someone who's not trustworthy. Then we expound. This means that re-entering a relationship with an individual who perpetrated sexual abuse is not an indicator that the survivor has forgiven. In some cases, this could actually be a continuation of the abuse. It also means that survivors of sexual abuse who establish firm boundaries and choose to separate themselves from the perpetrator may have fully forgiven their perpetrator. Then the next element that Elder Anderson says is, quote, forgiveness is not dismissing the hurt or disgust we feel. This means that forgiveness does not mean that we do not feel anger, pain, or grief. Forgiveness is not repressing or denying the strong emotions that are evoked in our souls when our worth as divine children of God is violated. Forgiveness does not require disconnecting from ourselves, including our feelings and the truth of our experience. And then his fourth, forgiveness is not forgetting, but remembering in peace. The old adage, forgive and forget, is not scriptural or doctrinal. And there's plenty of footnotes for that. And so that if you go through all four of those, okay, forgiveness is not dismissing the disgust or the hurt. It's actually having those strong emotions. It's compatible with having those strong emotions of grief, of anger, of pain. It's not forgetting. It actually is remembering, but remembering in peace. It's holding someone accountable. It's actually has nothing to do with re-entering a relationship that could be a possibility as both people heal. Reconciliation is like forgiveness would be a prerequisite to reconciliation, but is dependent on a lot of people making a lot of different choices. So it's not an individual. Anyways, like that's actually not what God is asking us to do, is to re-enter into relationships with people who are not respecting or valuing us. And so then maybe I'll just briefly share, and then Shirley can jump in again. That kind of left us like, okay, so what is forgiveness? And we pulled from the Greek word aphemi, which is what Christ used most often to describe forgiveness. And he talks, and the definition is to let go, to lay aside, to set at a distance, to set loose, to set free. And we go through different examples of what forgiveness could be and can look like. And really, I think a big summary for me is forgiveness is choosing the healing journey. Like as we choose to set ourselves free of the wounds that we've experienced by healing, that is forgiveness. Or letting go, not letting go of the harm or the hurt or the reality that could be misunderstood. So you kind of got to make sure you're comparing it to Elder Anderson's quote, but letting go of victimhood, in that everyone will be victimized, but actually embracing our agency of we can still choose our path forward, and we don't have to be defined by the wounds that we incurred at no fault of our own, but we can choose to like make the empowering decision to acknowledge our wounds and heal from them and partner with the Savior to do that. And then one more that's been really powerful for me is remembering in peace. Actually, that's what we do every Sunday with the sacrament, is we experience Christ's forgiveness as we remember with him his atonement. Like he never asks us to forget his atonement. It's actually remembering the suffering and the triumphant victory over that suffering that connects us to him. And so it's not forgetting or pretending like something didn't happen, like the pain didn't happen. It's actually providing context for then where we're all going as we remember in peace. I did kind of a poor job there at the end, but because there's just so much more depth to it, I feel like. But that's been really powerful, because it is often like, I hear a lot of people kind of weaponizing forgiveness against survivors. Like, why are you bringing this up again? But it's like, no, we'll always bring it up. not from a place of mudslinging, but just this is context for what I've experienced and why I have a testimony of Jesus Christ. Like, it's an important part of our witness of the healing that is possible, is sharing the full context.
Thank you for
I
sharing that.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add, Ben, just Sage, thank you so much. You did a beautiful job summarizing. I think we often use forgiveness to bypass the hard work of the healing journey, right? We want the result of what we define forgiveness as looking as if nothing happened. Everything's fine. We're all good. Things are great. No relationships are damaged. We're all just happy, right? We want that image. We want it for our families. We want it for ourselves. And it can be scary to the work of healing is hard work. And some people don't want to live in accountability, right? They don't want to live those difficult things. And we can't choose that for other people. And so that can be difficult. So I think often we use forgiveness to say, just erase this. But what that does is it really does silence victims. It erases their experiences, and it doesn't allow the perpetrator of any offense the needed work they have to do to heal and the accountability that they need to heal and change. And so we really do all of ourselves a big disservice when we try to bypass that work of healing and call it forgiveness, because we get a counterfeit. We can't ever actually get the real fruits of what the healing journey can bring. It's a counterfeit. It's a mirage. It's an image. Whereas healing can bring true change and reconciliation. It can bring those things, right? It can bring at one meant with God, with ourselves, with others. That's the work of healing. But using forgiveness to bypass that can be so damaging, not just to the victim, but also to the family, to the community, and to the perpetrator as well, because they don't get the needed opportunity to change and heal that is required for them. So just wanted to add that with that.
We'll get back to the episode in just 1 second, but I'm sure that you've thought of at least one person that would enjoy this episode as much as you have. So why don't you press share and send it to just one person, and it'll help us to grow the show. Thank you. No, thank you for doing that. This has just been wonderful. I've learned so much, and I felt the Spirit a lot as well. I think there's a lot of things for everyone, I think, to kind of apply and learn from it and take from it. So I really appreciate you both coming on. I normally have a really nice, neat final question, but because time's flown so fast, what I really want to ask is, have we missed anything important from your perspectives? Is there anything that we haven't touched on that's like, oh yeah, before we go, we really need to kind of bring this up beforehand?
Ben, you brought up just, I've just been thinking about advice for friends and families. That was one of the things that you said.
Yes.
We'll address this. And it was just meaningful for me this morning as I was thinking through, and I'll get emotional here. The powerful and important role that friends and family have played in my healing journey, and the invitation to become that for someone else. Because absolutely, there is someone around you who is a survivor, and you can be that friend and family who makes their journey possible, makes their healing possible because of your love and support, and you're seeing them. And just a couple of quick examples. My husband, when I really couldn't see and understand my own value or the gravity of something that had happened to me, his willingness to step in and assert that value and say, this is not okay, to stand up to the wrong when I didn't have the strength or the sense of my own value to do it. That absolutely changed the course. I could see I am worth this. I'm worth being stood up for. I am worth someone saying, this isn't okay. And then following that, having really meaningful relationships with people who remind me of my value, who when I want to go retreat and say, this is too hard, I'm just going to be quiet, I'm just going to hide here. They say, no, we need your voice and we will stand with you. We'll take the stones, we'll take the arrows like Samuel the Lamanite, we'll take it with you because you matter and also because of what we are creating together in that community, right? It's not even just for me, but it's about what we create together as we stand together. And then lastly, and I'll just say Sage is an incredible gift. And being able to hear her voice and her words in this book is like having that friend or that family who walks with you and sees you and says, you can do this and you are worth it. And something that really, she wrote a letter in the afterword of the book, and I just would love to share just a little bit of it. She talks about the Savior and in his experience of healing the woman who touched the hem of his garment, right? The woman with the issue of blood. And she talks about how we can relate to that and the beautiful things surrounding that, what that meant. And then she talks about herself, and I'll just read this. She says, I have spent a lot of time thinking about the people all around this woman who did not see, respect, or value her. I wonder if they dismissed her because of ignorance, or if, because they were afraid to confront their own pain and shame, they could not tolerate hers. Maybe they were afraid of looking at her wounds because they were afraid of how being associated with her might impact their life. Or perhaps they convinced themselves that since they were not experts in her condition, they could not help her. They confused her need for compassion and connection with a need for solutions. I think many of them were unaware of the ways their reactions were likely hurting her, and unaware that their reactions were really a reflection of their own woundedness. In this interaction with the woman, the Savior invites us to open our eyes to see ourselves more clearly and to discover what our reactions to others' pain teach us about our own present state. And she said, I feel embarrassed to admit this, but I was honestly surprised to realize that I have wounds of disconnection. It is painful to become conscious of ways I have reacted to my own wounds. Anyway, it is so beautiful to think of the Savior's invitation to bring, as he brought that woman into the light, to also look at ourselves and think, how can we reach and see people in a more honest and complete and whole way and bring all of us into the light, to live in the light, so that none of us need to be hidden or ashamed. And her example, walking with me, doing this book with her, who she has been empowering and strengthening and so significantly meaningful. And we can be that for others as we see them and value them, not seeing them as the broken ones, but walking a journey of healing alongside and with them in a place of equality and in a place of seeing their value and worth.
Let me just add to what Shirley said, which is in that story, I learned in that story of the woman with the issue of blood, she didn't just like touch any part of the Savior's garment. She reached for the hem of his garment or the wing of his garment, which I believe she intentionally was acting on her faith of the prophecy that Malachi gave that the Savior would come with healing in his wings. And what's so beautiful and profound to me is in the scriptures we read afterwards, many others touched that wing of Jesus Christ's garment and experienced healing. And so her courage to walk her own journey with faith in Jesus Christ actually connected so many people, like set an example for so many people to better recognize the Savior and know how to connect to him. And Ben, I've been thinking about your audience in particular because I grew up. I grew up in a few places around the world, And the global church has been so formative for me in my life and in my own faith journey. Like, I love that you are a podcast to Latter-day Saints around the world. I grew up in Germany and in Greece and in Canada and Montreal, and that was a big part of my childhood. And then as a young adult, I went to school in London. And my experiences with Latter-day Saints around the world have really helped form and shape my understanding of God, my understanding of the human family, like just so much gratitude and respect for your listeners and love. Like my best friends, some of my best friends in the church are members, are members around the world, and they really help ground me in like what's cultural versus what's really the gospel of Jesus Christ, because we're approaching it sometimes from different cultural contexts. And I like just want your listeners to know that we need them. Like we need, if there's one thing I've learned from history about like how we change in the restoration, it's the whole global church. Like your voices really matter, your influence really matters. We need survivors like sharing their wisdom. It changes and blesses everyone. And maybe this could be a good note for me to end on. Shirley and I write a letter together at the beginning of the book directly to the reader. And this is just the last paragraph, and it's really an invitation. And this is the invitation I would extend to anyone listening. So we hope the material in this book will inspire and empower you to look to Christ and apply the truths of his restored gospel to your personal healing journey. Regardless of your age, gender, culture, or nationality, we hope that as you read, you will feel and know that you're not alone and that you can heal. We also hope that this book will embolden you to share your healing journey as you feel inspired to do so. We need your witness. The human family needs survivors from around the world to share their experiences. The wisdom you gain on your healing journey is important information that can help all of us, individually and collectively, receive more inspiration about how to heal from the many wounds experienced by the human family. There's still so much for us to learn. This is just the beginning. And I would just share my own personal like testimony of this, which is I've learned so much about healing from Shirley, like through the process. I've been so inspired to lean into my own healing journey and to better understand myself and to be less afraid of looking at myself and more empowered by like the agency that I have that Jesus Christ preserved and expanded for me. And I just know as more survivors and family members and friends, just as Latter-day Saints live these principles, like it helps everyone. Like we live in a world that so desperately needs healing in so many areas. And I really believe this is an area that as we embrace these principles, we could really make impact as Latter-day Saints for like the human family. And also just in our own lives, but also for the human family. So yeah, just for anyone listening, it's just so much gratitude that you would take the time to listen to this conversation, and also a lot of um, hope that this is something you'll be a part of and join in.
Thank you so much. Thanks for both of you for what you've shared today. You're both so wonderful. It's nice to spend time with you both. You just feel lifted. It's nice, and grateful for the important things that you've shared as well, and sharing so generously of your own personal experiences too, as well as kind of expertise and insights and spiritual insights too. I'm grateful for all of it, and I know that our listeners will be too. And listeners, you can get the book. You have a website for the book, don't you? But you also, I'll mention this, that you can also listen to the book on a 30-day free trial on Deseret Bookshelf. Is that right?
You can. Right. It's an audiobook, and Shirley and I do the audiobook together.
And then I'll link the website as well in the description for people to learn more. But yeah, thank you both so much. It's been such a nice time learning about this kind of heavy topic, but it's hopeful to the way we've approached it. Hopefully people feel that it's, hopeful, and it's a positive message, and it's a Christ-centered message. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Ben. It's been such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for watching For All the Saints. If you enjoyed that episode, then you'll love this one.